Welcome, dear students. Hope you had gone through the text as well as the detailed explanation of the chapter part 1 and part 2, and you would have had understood the deep feeling of Franz towards his teacher and his language that had awakened at the moment when he came to know that it was his last class. When from one thing to another, M. Hamel went on to talk of the French language, saying that it was the most beautiful language in the world, the clearest and the most logical, that we must guard against it and never forget one's own motherland or one's own mother tongue. He tells the whole class to guard their language, as it is the only way to free oneself from the prison of slavery. That is, as long as they hold fast to their language, it is as if they had the key to their prison. If a person knows his mother tongue well, only then can he raise his voice against against and protest against the wrong done to them by overpowering them, by enslaving them. Knowing the mother tongue well as a language is a tool to fight domination. Children, one thing we need to always accept that we should be proud of our nation. We should be proud of our language. And we should learn. We should make an effort to learn our own language more than any other language in the world. The only thing that we need to keep in mind is our language is our own. We have a right as well as a duty to respect our language and to take it to greater heights in the world and not emulate or follow blindly the other cultures, other languages, because people in the world speak that language. It is only when we will accord the due respect to our language and our nation is when the world will respect us. Now, Franz makes a significant statement. He says, all he said seemed so easy. So easy, I think, too, that I had never listened so carefully. Why does Franz feel that this last lesson seemed to be so very easy? And such a thing never happened earlier with him. The only reason behind it is you all also would accept and would practically believe it, that until and unless you have an inner motivation or zeal towards learning something or knowing something, you cannot bring that interest, that dedication to know more about it. And similar happened with Franz. We can also say, as M. Hamel blamed himself, that perhaps he also did not motivate his children or his students to arouse a liking towards the learning that he imparted to them. Franz continues to say, I had never listened so carefully and that he had never explained everything with so much patience. See, Something that goes on or that happens depends on both the doer as well as the receiver. We cannot blame only the child for not studying or not showing interest. But here, the teacher as well as the elders are also to be blamed equally, who did not let their children learn, who did not motivate them to continue their learning rather than whiling away their time here and there. To Franz, it seemed almost as if the poor man wanted to give us all he knew before going away. You can here at this point realize the pain in the heart of the teacher, whose life became a complete zero. It became an unsuccessful life, as his time as a teacher was over. But he could not make a mark in the hearts and minds of his students, as he himself did not give his 100%. And now, since it was the last class, he wanted to give away all his knowledge. After the grammar, we had a lesson in writing. That day, M. Hamel had new copies for us, written in a beautiful round handwriting. France, Alsace, France, Alsace. They looked like little flags floating everywhere in the schoolroom, hung from the road at the top of our desks. You ought to have seen how everyone set to work and how quiet it was. The only sound was the scratching of the pens over the paper. Each and everyone in the classroom was so dedicated towards the lesson. Why? Because it was the last lesson. Once some beetles flew in, but nobody paid any attention to them. Not even the littlest ones, who worked right on tracing their fish hooks, as if that was French too. On the roof, the pigeons cooed, very low, and I thought to myself, will they make them sing in German, even the pigeons? After grammar, they had a lesson in writing, and M. Hamel gave them new notebooks. And there, all of them they wrote France, Alsace, France, Alsace. Franz felt that there was an air of patriotism in the class. The notebooks were like flags of France that were floating all around. The entire class was busy writing, and the only sound that could be heard was that of pen writing on the paper. Once some insects flew into the class, but no one panicked as everyone was busy writing. At this juncture, a significant feeling, thought, a striking thought is brought out through the heart and mind of a child. All of a sudden, Franz had a thought when he looked at the pigeons on the roof. The pigeons who cooed very low. And Franz thought to himself, he wondered that would the Prussians force the pigeons also to change their language and coo in German? The writer wants to say that language comes naturally to a being and it cannot be forced upon anyone, be it the pigeons or the Frenchmen. The Germans who overpowered Alsace and Lorraine They considered themselves on top of everyone. And in due course, they forgot that no one, absolutely no one, can rule over nature. At this juncture, children, don't you think that the present circumstances have become an eye opener for all of us? We human beings have been plundering the wealth of nature as if all was there only for us and no one else. But taking nature into one's hand and playing with it has caused us a huge change in our normal way of living. We are still waiting to find a new normal. Will we ever get it? Shifting his thoughts back at the teacher, he looked up and saw M. Hamel sitting motionless in his chair and gazing first at one thing, then at another, as if he wanted to fix in his mind just how everything looked in that little schoolroom. Fancy for 40 years he had been there in the same place, with his garden outside, the window, and his class in front of him. We can very easily understand how deeply pained and disheartened M. Hamel was at that moment. Just like we all were really very happy in our life, which was just passing by so beautifully in its own course and its own manner, and all of a sudden, the whole mankind was engulfed by just a meager virus. And now we don't have any way out to come out of it. And at this time, when we all are locked in our homes, we all are reminiscent, thinking about those beautiful days. I hope each and every one is reminded of the classrooms, of the corridors, of the stairs where we used to enjoy so much, full of naughtiness, full of sound, liveliness, scoldings from teachers, at times praises also. Every now and then busy, shifting between classes, practicals, events, annual day preparations, rehearsals. Will we ever have that normal life back again? Similar was the thought in M. Hamel's mind. And he sat motionlessly on his chair with a fixed look, tried to capture each and everything in his eyes all around his classroom, his garden, his chair, all that he could see outside the window in front of him. What M. Hamel could see outside were only the desks and benches that had been worn out in so many years. The walnut trees in the garden were taller, and the hopvine that he had planted himself twined about the windows to the roof. Each and everything had grown in front of his eyes. How it must have broken his heart to leave it all, poor man. To hear his sister moving about in the room above, packing their trunks, for they must leave the country next day. More painful than going away was that he had to leave at a juncture when his task was not yet complete. And he could see, as well as feel and hear, his sister packing bags on top of their room. But he had the courage to hear every lesson to the very last. After the writing, we had a lesson in history, and then the babies chanted their Barbie, boo, boo. Down there at the back of the room, old Hauser had put on his spectacles and holding his primer in both hands, spelled the letters with them. The old Hauser, each and everyone in the classroom had the same strain of thought and the same pain that it was their last lesson, and they did not make most of the time that they had got to know more about their language. You could see that he too was crying. His voice trembled with emotion. And it was so funny to hear him that we all wanted to laugh and cry. Ah, how well I remember it, that last lesson. All at once the church clock struck 12, then the Angelus. At the same moment, the trumpets of the Prussians returning from drill sounded under our windows. M. Hamel stood up, very pale in his chair. I never saw him look so tall. My friends, said he, I. But something choked him. He could not speak. He could not go on. His throat seemed to be choked, seemed to be caught in the severity of the emotions. Then he turned to the blackboard, took a piece of chalk and a bearing. On with all his might, he wrote as large as he could, Vive la France. Then he stopped and leaned his head against the wall, and without a word, he made a gesture to us with his hand. School is dismissed. You may go. Children, the last words of M. Hamel, Vive la France, that is, long live France, etched a staunch belief and a thought in the hearts and minds of not only France but all the villagers, that if they could cling on, remain strongly with their language, they could one day surely undo all the wrong that has been done. They can surely come out of all this situation. And here Franz also comments quite prolifically. Ah, how well I will remember it, that last lesson. And till the time Franz would remember this last lesson of long live France, till then he would deeply be rooted to his nation and could raise his voice against the oppression and domination. Thank you so much, children. This was the end of explanation. Kindly go through all the three parts and try to write down the value points after you have seen all the three videos and read the PDF. Thank you so much.